how to use English verbs correctly without confusion. Hello everyone. Welcome to today's lesson. We are going to focus on one of the most important aspects of English: verbs. Verbs are the backbone of any sentence. They tell us what is happening, who is doing it, and when. Yet, verbs are one of the most confusing areas for learners. You might ask, when do I use go versus went? Do I say I have seen or I saw? Asterisk, or how do I use make and do correctly? Don't worry, today we'll break it all down. I'll show you clear strategies to use verbs correctly, understand tenses, and avoid common mistakes. We'll also practice with examples, mini exercises, and practical tips. By the end, using verbs will feel much simpler and more natural. So, let's begin by building the foundation of confident communication. Because speaking English fluently starts with mindset, practice, and simple, actionable steps. Step 1. Understanding what a verb is. Before we learn how to use verbs correctly, we need to make sure we understand what a verb actually is. A verb is one of the most important parts of a sentence. It's the word that shows an action or a state of being. In fact, almost every complete sentence in English has a verb. Without a verb, your sentence is incomplete. There are two main types of verbs. 1. Action verbs. These describe something happening, something you can see or imagine. Examples: run, eat, study, jump, write, play. Example sentence: I eat breakfast every morning. Here, eat is the action. 2. State verbs. These describe a condition, situation, or feeling, rather than a physical action. Examples: be, have, know, like, feel. Example sentence: she knows the answer. Here, knows is a state, it's not an action you can see, but it describes what she understands. Understanding the difference between action verbs and state verbs is very important, because it helps you choose the right verb when making sentences. Now let's try a mini exercise together. Look around you right now and describe what's happening using action verbs. I am sitting. I am typing. I am listening. Now, try with state verbs to describe how you feel or what you have. I am tired. I feel happy. I have a cup of coffee. By practicing this way, you start to notice the difference between actions you perform and states you experience. This is the foundation for using verbs correctly in English sentences. Step 2. Identify the subject before choosing the verb. Now that you understand what a verb is, the next step is to make sure the verb matches the subject. This rule is called subject-verb agreement. Many learners make mistakes here because they focus only on the verb and forget to check who the subject is. But every verb must agree with the subject of the sentence. Otherwise, the sentence sounds wrong. The idea is simple. When the subject is just one person or thing, the verb must also be singular. For example, we say, she walks to school, not she walked to school. On the other hand, when the subject is more than one person or thing, the verb should be plural. We say, they are happy, not they is happy. Even small mistakes like these can confuse the listener, which is why it is important to slow down and check. The key question to ask yourself is always, who is doing the action? If it is one person, you need a singular verb. If it is more than one person, you need a plural verb. By practicing this regularly, subject-verb agreement becomes automatic. It might take a little effort at first, but soon you will find yourself choosing the right verb form naturally, without even thinking about it. This small habit of checking the subject before speaking or writing will save you from many common grammar mistakes and help your sentences sound smooth and correct. Over time, this will make your English clearer, more accurate, and more confident. Step 3. Understand verb tenses. Another important part of using verbs correctly is understanding verb tenses. A verb tense tells us when the action happens, whether it is in the past, the present, or the future. Using the wrong tense is one of the most common mistakes English learners make, so learning how to use them correctly is essential for clear communication. In the present tense, we talk about actions that are happening right now, or things that happen regularly. For example, if you say, "I eat breakfast every day," you are describing a habit or routine, while "I am eating breakfast now" describes an action happening at this very moment. The past tense is used for actions that already happened. If you say, "I ate breakfast this morning," you are describing a finished action in the past. On the other hand, "I was eating breakfast when you called" shows an action that was in progress when another event interrupted it. The future tense describes actions that will happen later. When you say, "I will eat breakfast tomorrow," you are talking about a planned action, while "I will be eating breakfast at 8 a.m. gives even more detail by showing that the action will be in progress at a specific time in the future. Each tense provides extra detail about when an action happens, and sometimes whether it is finished or still continuing. This is why mastering verb tenses helps you express yourself with much more clarity. One important tip is to pay close attention to irregular verbs. These do not follow the normal ed rule for past tense. For example, go becomes went, see becomes saw, and eat becomes ate. These irregular forms appear very often in daily conversations, so memorizing them will make your English sound much more natural and confident. Step 4. Different types of verbs. Verbs can feel confusing at first because there are different types, and each type behaves a little differently. The most common type is the action verb, which shows what someone does. When you say, "I run," "she writes," or "they eat," the verb describes a physical action that you can imagine or see happening. Another type is the linking verb, which does not show an action, but instead connects the subject to a state or description. Words like be, seem, and become are linking verbs. For example, when you say, "she is happy," or "he seems tired," the verb is linking the subject to how they are, rather than describing something they are doing. We also use helping verbs, also called auxiliary verbs. These verbs work together with other verbs to form questions, negatives, and different tenses. Common helping verbs include be, do, have, will, and can. You can see them in sentences like, "I am eating," "she has finished," or "do you like it?" Without helping verbs, English would not have the same variety of expressions and time forms. Another very important group is the modal verbs, which add extra meaning by expressing possibility, ability, permission, or necessity. Words such as can, could, may, might, must, should, and would belong to this group. When you say, "I can speak English," or "you should try this exercise," the modal verb changes the way that sentence is understood by showing ability or giving advice. Understanding the different types of verbs helps you see why English sentences are formed in different ways. If you look at the sentence, "she is a teacher," you will notice the verb is works as a linking verb. In "I can swim very well," the word can is a modal verb showing ability. In "they play football every weekend," the verb play is an action verb that shows what they do. By noticing these differences, you will be able to use verbs more accurately and with greater confidence. Step 5. Avoid common confusions. Some verbs in English can be tricky because learners often mix them up. Even if you know the meaning of each verb, it is easy to choose the wrong one in daily conversation. Understanding the small differences will help you avoid mistakes and sound more natural. A common example is the difference between do and make. We use do for actions, tasks, or general work, such as I do my homework or she does the laundry. On the other hand, make is used when you create, produce, or build something, like I make a cake or he made a new plan. If you remember that do is about activity and make is about creation, the difference becomes clearer. Another pair that often causes confusion is say and tell. The verb say focuses on the words a person speaks. For example, she said hello, simply reports what words came out of her mouth. Tell is different because it emphasizes giving information to someone. When you say, she told me a secret, the verb highlights that the information was directed to you. A useful trick is to remember that tell almost always has a person after it, while say does not need one. Finally, many learners struggle with watch, look, and see. These three verbs are all connected to using your eyes, but they are not the same. Watch means to observe something carefully and for a period of time, such as I watch TV or we watch the game. Look means to direct your eyes towards something, often just for a moment, as in, look at that bird. See is different because it refers to the ability to perceive with your eyes, not an action you choose. When you say, I can see the mountains, it means they are visible to you, not that you are actively focusing on them. By paying attention to these small but important differences, you will avoid common mistakes and make your English sound much clearer and more natural. With practice, choosing the correct verb will soon become automatic. Step 6. Pay attention to irregular verbs. One of the biggest challenges in learning English verbs is dealing with irregular verbs. Unlike regular verbs, which simply add ed to form the past tense and past participle, irregular verbs do not follow a fixed pattern. This means you cannot simply guess their forms. You need to learn and practice them individually. For example, the verb go changes to went in the past tense and gone as the past participle. The verb eat becomes ate and then eaten, while see turns into saw and seen. None of these follow the standard ed rule, which is why learners often make mistakes with them. Because irregular verbs appear very frequently in everyday English, mastering them is essential for fluency. Imagine trying to tell a story about what you did yesterday without knowing the past forms of common verbs like go, come, have, see, or do. Without them, your sentences may sound confusing or incomplete. That's why focusing on these verbs early in your learning journey saves you a lot of frustration later. A practical way to improve is to study irregular verbs in small groups, instead of trying to memorize a long list at once. For example, you could choose 10 irregular verbs for the week and practice them until they feel natural. Flashcards are a great tool for this. On one side, write the base form of the verb, and on the other, write the past tense and past participle. Each time you practice, challenge yourself to make real sentences with each form, such as, I go to the park every day. I went to the park yesterday, and I have gone to the park many times. This not only helps you memorize the forms, but also trains you to use them in real situations. It also helps to notice patterns where they exist. Some irregular verbs change in similar ways. For example, drink, drank, drunk, and sing, sang, soon follow a similar pattern, as do buy, bought, bought, and bring, dash, brought, brought. Recognizing these patterns can make learning easier because you are not memorizing each verb in isolation. You are connecting them in groups. The key is consistent practice. If you set a goal of learning just 10 to 20 irregular verbs every week, you will quickly build a strong foundation. In a couple of months, you will know most of the verbs that native speakers use daily. With repetition, these forms will become automatic, and you won't have to pause and think during conversations. Step 7. Practice using verbs in questions and negatives. Another important part of mastering verbs is learning how to use them correctly in questions and negative sentences. This can feel tricky at first, because the word order changes, and auxiliary verbs like do, does, and did are often needed. In the simple present tense, when you want to ask a question, you place do or does at the beginning, depending on the subject. For example, instead of saying you like coffee, which sounds incomplete, the correct form is do you like coffee? If the subject is third person singular, such as she or he, you use does. For instance, does she play tennis? Notice that in these questions the main verb stays in its base form. It doesn't take an S or change form, because the auxiliary verb already carries the tense. The same pattern applies in the past tense, but here we use did for all subjects. For example, to ask about an action yesterday, you say, did you go to the market? And not, did you went to the market? Again, the main verb returns to its base form after did. Many learners make the mistake of keeping the verb in the past tense after did, but once you remember that the auxiliary verb shows the tense, the rule becomes much easier. Forming negatives also requires auxiliaries. In the present tense, we add do not or its contraction don't. And for third person singular, we use does not or doesn't. So you might say, I don't like spinach, or she doesn't watch TV. In the past tense, we use did not or didn't, as in, they didn't finish their homework. Just like in questions, the main verb stays in the base form after did not. Instead of saying, they didn't finish, the correct sentence is, they didn't finish. The best way to become comfortable with these forms is to practice them regularly. Try taking a simple verb like eat and making as many questions and negatives as possible. For example, do you eat breakfast every day? Does your friend eat vegetables? I don't eat fast food. She doesn't eat meat. Did you eat dinner last night? I didn't eat anything this morning. With enough practice, forming questions and negatives will become automatic, and you'll be able to use them in real conversations without hesitation. Step 8. Daily practice to avoid confusion. The key to mastering verbs and avoiding confusion is consistent daily practice. Learning the rules is important, but using them regularly in writing and speaking is what truly makes them stick. One effective approach is to make a habit of writing a few sentences each day that use different verbs in the present, past, and future tenses. This helps you see how verbs change depending on the time of the action and reinforces the correct forms in your mind. Speaking verbs aloud is equally important. Take 2 or 3 of your daily sentences and say them clearly, paying attention to the verb forms. Speaking helps train your mouth and brain to produce correct sentences automatically, so that when you are in a real conversation, the correct verb forms come out naturally. Another useful technique is a mini quiz for yourself. Pick one verb and challenge yourself to form sentences in the present, past, and future. For example, if your verb is go, you might say, I go to the park every day. Yesterday I went to the park. And tomorrow I will go to the park. Doing this regularly strengthens your memory and ensures that you understand how verbs work in different tenses. By practicing every day, even for just a few minutes, you will notice that verb confusion gradually disappears. Your sentences become clearer, you're speaking more confident, and you're writing more accurate. Consistency is the most powerful tool in mastering verbs and using them naturally in English. Conclusion. Using English verbs correctly doesn't have to be confusing. The key is to understand the different types of verbs, such as action verbs, state verbs, linking verbs, auxiliary verbs, and modal verbs, and to recognize how each one works in a sentence. Once you know the type of verb, the next step is to make sure it matches the subject, which is called subject-verb agreement. Paying attention to who is performing the action will help your sentences sound natural and correct. It is also essential to know the correct tense, past, present, or future, so that your listener understands when an action takes place. Irregular verbs require special attention, and it's best to learn them gradually, practicing them in sentences rather than just memorizing lists. At the same time, avoid common confusions such as mixing up do and make, say and tell, or see, look, and watch. Understanding these differences will make your English clearer and more precise. Questions and negatives are another area where learners often hesitate, but with consistent practice, forming them becomes second nature. Daily practice is the most important step of all. Writing a few sentences, speaking them aloud, and testing yourself with mini quizzes ensures that you are actively using verbs, not just learning rules. Over time, this builds confidence and fluency. The final tip is to start small. Take one verb at a time, focus on using it correctly, and gradually expand your knowledge. Using verbs correctly is like building with blocks. Once you master each piece, forming complete, natural sentences becomes easy. If you follow these steps and practice consistently every day, your speaking and writing will become much clearer, more accurate, and more confident. Mastery of verbs is not just about rules. It's about forming habits that make English feel natural and effortless. If you found this lesson helpful, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for daily English tips. Like this video if it helped you. Comment below with your favorite tip or a question, and share it with friends who want to improve their English too. Your support keeps us motivated to bring you more practical lessons every day.